Chris and Brian from Resolve Technology. And today we're going to talk about backups, specifically a vendor that we use. One of the backup vendors that we use is Veeam, Veeam. A weird name, but good backup software. So Chris is going to explain a little bit about what we do, how we keep customers up and running. If they run into a hardware failure or a software failure, they need to turn back the clock. This is a little bit, he'll try not to get too technical, but a little bit about what we're doing in the background as far as backups.
Yeah, sure. So I got a couple open remote sessions here. This main screen, if I make it full, this is the Veeam and Backup and Replication Community Edition. This is not the paid version, but it lives on a Windows server. So I just have a regular Dell Optiplex with Windows Server license. So it's like it could be used for a workstation. Some smaller clients prefer that, or it could be virtualized, but it's just a Windows server that has the Veeam software installed, along with a couple hard drives. Now, for the most part, you can back up workstations, you can do the replication and hook into Microsoft Hyper-V, which is just virtualization software. Say you have one piece of physical equipment that's your server, and you need to host multiple application servers. This is the tool that we generally run into. Also,
so let me stop there for a quick explanation. Nowadays, in the old days, a small business might have 3, 4, 5 servers, physical boxes. Nowadays, those physical boxes might be, instead of 4 or 5, might be 1 or 2. And then what we do is we put the extra servers in the physical boxes. So you can run more than one server on a physical box. You may be able to run 2, 3, 10, 20. Big companies in the data centers like Google and Microsoft, they're running hundreds of virtual servers within that physical box. So I just want to give that little explanation.
Yeah, as you can see, I can go into I can view my backup job, but if I come here to disk, you can see I have 5 restore points. I can restore the entire virtual machine, restore just a file. They deleted a file. I can go in there and pull it off. One thing I did want to mention though with this is you can, the way I have it set up is I have multiple drives here. So I have the C drive, which isn't much on it, and this E drive. There's not much on this Veeam box. This is just a regular workstation. However, I add my 2 servers have a lot of storage, 4 terabytes. And I also have a Synology NAS with 8 terabytes. So I can hook that in as like a location to back up my files. I don't have to specifically back up to Veeam. Like they call it a repository. So I have several repositories based on the needs of how much data I'm backing up. And I want to note too that you can back this up to the cloud, whether it's the Azure Gov Cloud, AWS, Google Cloud, Backblaze, S3 compatible, you name it. Now that we've seen Veeam here, if we go into my host, so I have these hosts are 2 physical servers, and if I make one of these screens, so this is host 2, I got it running an application server and a backup domain controller, which handles all the authentication. So like when you sign in to your computer at the office, but you see these replicas. So for whatever reason, my main host blows up. I have a replica ready to go. And the last 7 snapshots, once every hour, every 10 minutes, whatever interval you want, you can really tune this to your needs.
So let me give a real world example of this. This is Chris's lab, but the DC1, DC2, that is typically what you would have in a small business to authenticate on the network, to log into the network. Your workstations need to log into what they call a DC. Typically you have 2 of them, and if one or both of those, if one of those DCs goes down, the other one is usually there to take over. But say they both went down, and then nobody could log into your network, right? Users could not log in. They wouldn't be able to log in. So then we would have to go here to Veeam, and Chris is talking about, and maybe spin up the replica, which is, again, a virtual machine. It's in the backup, and you just spin that up. So go ahead, Chris, talk a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so you could spin it up. Now, I just have the replica suffix, but this should know that CCAL DC1 replica is the same IP address, same Hyper-V settings, if we came in here, like the same amount, everything's set up the same. It's the same virtual hard disk. So think of it like the same exact computer, the server. It's the same as that's not the replica. If I come here where it actually lives, it's all the same. So if I turn this off right right now and turned on replica, it would be like it never went down. We just see the replica suffix there. So that's more for us. So we know that's the replicate, that's from replication. You got to have a suffix there unless you want to have multiple devices with the same host name and IP. It's going to cause a lot of conflict.
Yeah, let's not go down too far down the technical road, but understand that replica just means it's a duplicate of your server. So we have them set up generally for most clients that I wouldn't say, it depends on the situation, depends on the size. Not everybody needs this complex of a system, but for the larger businesses, we need to be able to spin up that replica or duplicate, and it's done on a regular basis so we don't have to think about it. So when the crisis happens, boom, Chris goes into the replica. The other server is likely off. It had a hardware or software issue, or we turn it off, and then you just turn the replica on and boom, you're back in business. Does that sound right, Chris?
Yeah. And then as you can see, I went into just one of them. You can see these VBM files. You can see these backup files for the backup job. So like here, this is where it lives. And then I got all this, like that's for, all this is for Veeam. So it does a normal layout, backup job 1. I just said 14 times.
Yes, okay. So basically what Chris is showing you is you can see where it says increment. At times it knows when to do a full backup based on the settings that we put in. And other times it'll just do an incremental. So it doesn't take as long to do a backup. It looks at the changes and just does a backup of the changes. So this is all automatic. The only thing that we need to do each month is make sure that it's working properly. And one of the ways we do that is we do tests. One of the guys will go in and grab some files, or even spin up the virtual machine like we were talking about, and then we know it works. That's pretty much it in a nutshell without diving deeper into the more technical.
Yeah, I'm not going to get those. I was about the synthetic backups, but we don't need to really go.
We don't know. There is a lot more to that.
We could add one more thing. What I meant by the backup storage is generally you want it on a server, or even if you virtualize Veeam as like a virtual host, the storage doesn't need to be on that little Veeam Optiplex. It has multiple methods of adding backup repositories. You could have it in the cloud. But what I meant by my Synology NAS is over some protocol, NFS, bshare, just like a map drive essentially, and you can just back it up to there. So it's fairly flexible in how you can configure it. This is just one lab example. There's 9,000 different ways you can have this set up.
Right, which is why we like Veeam, because it gives you so many different options to choose from, because the client might have already purchased some of this hardware and we want to make sure we're maximizing all the space and things like that. All right, Chris, we'll wrap it there. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.
Bye.